708 on CJD. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. How are you, Josh?
Excellent, Dan, as always.
Good. Later on, we'll be talking about business owners lending money to the banks, and you're going to offer some tips on that.
Yeah, kind of, when entrepreneurs, before they walk into the bank or wherever they're going to borrow money from, what should you know? What are the little tips and tricks and challenges and pitfalls to avoid?
All right, so that's A to Z on lending and borrowing coming up after 7:45. But for now, our guest this evening is Albert Chambers. We're going into the music business, Josh, of Bass Bin Studios. Welcome, Albert.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Good, how are you?
Good.
And I think tonight, Dan, other than the fact that you're going to hear the passion exude from Albert's story, I mean, this is a guy that what's a vacation? He enjoys his business so much that he, vacation, I enjoy what I do every day. I don't need a vacation. But let's get the listener up to speed on exactly what Bass Bin Studio does. Albert, perhaps you can enlighten us exactly on what the service or product you provide today.
Yeah, let me start by saying I stole that quote, the vacation thing, from Madonna. So apparently she loves what she does so much she doesn't feel the need to go on vacation. I think that's a lie, but
you don't look like her. It's okay.
It's good. We won't confuse the two. Studio Bass Bin started just around 17 years ago as a fully equipped rehearsal facility. So bands that were coming into town, or basically the bulk of the Quebec industry, that needed a rehearsal space that was fully equipped and wanted to rent per hour. That's what we offered that service to these people. There were already studios that were open that were close to what I was doing. I just figured I'd just get it a little bigger, better equipment, just a better facility all around. And 17 years later, we've morphed into more than just the rehearsal studios. But the bulk of it, that's what basically we were. So yeah.
What else do you do other than just the rehearsal studio today? What do you offer other musicians?
Right now, I am a freelance producer, songwriter. I just finished. I finished last summer co-writing a record for Coral Egan. So that record that's coming out now. I helped collaborate in that collaboration. I also record for Corey Hart. Vocals that I just did actually not too long ago for the English version of Don Juan, but it's Don Juan. And so I gained a reputation for recording vocals, and now Corey calls upon me for any type of like artist that he's either working with or songs that he wants to pitch, and he needs people singing on them. So yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
Now let's take it back 17 plus years you've been in business. What drove you into it? What were you doing before that you said, you know what, I just got to go out on my own?
Yeah, I mean, long story short, I mean, prior to Studio Bass Bin, I won't go into my whole history, but I worked music instrument retail, and I worked for Steve's Music Store for a number of years, and that was basically, I'd call that the real world. It was school. I learned how to be personable with clientele, and learned how to just interact with people's needs, and putting my ego aside. People needed to get served, and they didn't need excuses to for any type of reason of why I wouldn't be able to get whatever they needed at that store. They just needed a certain either instrument or part, and I just had to step up my game. And that place was constantly busy, so I learned a lot from Dave and Sheldon, who were like the head managers of that store. Yeah.
But you didn't see that as, a lifelong task, lifelong job. You felt some need to go out on your own.
Yeah, you know what the thing is that I've always been a self-motivated type of person. And whether I was working at Steve's or any other place prior to that, I always treated where I worked as my own business. I wouldn't have the mindset of I'm an employee of this store. I always had the mindset of how can I make this place better. It didn't even belong to me, and I in the end I feel like I was doing these places a service by just being extremely just passionate about whatever I was doing at that time. If my job was as to some people as mundane as just making sure that the wall was filled with inventory and it always looked filled. I mean, I took that to 110% with passion. It was it was kind of silly, but I believe that it just helped me motivate myself to go on and to do other things for myself. I said, well, if I can do this for somebody else with that type of inspiration and passion, well then why shouldn't I be doing this for myself?
Now, when you first opened, you had to find a location. How did you find your first location? What was the crux? What was the reasoning of I got to be there?
You know what? It kind of fell on my lap by mistake. I was really looking everywhere. At first, I started looking in warehouse, industrial type areas because the first thing you think of is that I'm going to be opening up rehearsal studios, people playing at 120 plus dB volume. I have to make soundproof rooms, but at the same time, I'm thinking, well, I don't want to disturb neighbors just in case my soundproofing isn't, up to par. So I realized that when I was looking in industrial areas, I wasn't even allowed to actually build in that type of zonage. I wasn't permitted to create what was called, I guess, post-production studios in an industrial area. It sounds kind of weird. I had to find a commercial building to do such. And I would just literally drive down the street, walk down the street, rollerblade down the street. I mean, we're talking 17 years ago, right? So, I mean, it was quite a while ago. I was a little younger than I am now. So, I would just check out addresses, literally go to the Ville de Montréal and say, this address, this is what I want to do. And they would tell me whether I was zoned for that area.
Today's entrepreneur on CJAD, our guest Albert Chambers of Basespin Studios. We'll talk about throughout the program financing too, Josh, and it's a very capital-intensive business, I would imagine. So we'll get to that as well with Albert.
I dig myself deeper.
7:18 on today's entrepreneur, and Josh Miller with me here, of course. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, and our guest is Albert Chambers of Basespin Studios, and what you're just hearing right now is, I guess, some of Albert's work.
Yeah, that's I am a songwriter, producer, and that's an example of some tracks that I produce for clients, and some known and some not so known. Yeah.
Now, I want to save that question later and how you kind of got known in the market and marketing. But before we get there, you gotta. Was it random? I mean, you're out. You left one job one day. Was it random? Did you have a plan going out? What was the evolution of the thought before you really opened the door?
I guess the day that I had quit my previous job at Steve's, I didn't have an idea what I wanted to do. It wasn't a foreseen thought. I basically quit that day on a whim. I just felt there was the need for me to move and to do something else with my life, and I quickly realized that there was a need for rehearsal studios because I was still an active musician at that time. I was still playing, clubs, playing live in bars, and I'd rehearse in these, roach-infested places. And I remember opening my bass case one night at home and literally seeing a roach crawl out of my. So when I say roach-infested, this is literally, and I said there's got to be a better place, around. I mean, why can't I do something? I said, okay, it's like nobody's going to reinvent the wheel, but I can make it better with bigger mags and really shiny, right? So I figured I'd start my research on basically building rehearsal studios and finding out how much, and started doing my marketing and research and of how many studios were in a certain area, what my demographic was. And, this is back before, the internet.
It took a little bit longer. I mean, you had to go through paper as opposed to clicking.
I had to go through paper. I had to do the footwork. I literally had to hit the pavement, go out on the street, and or either hit the yellow pages and go, how many rehearsal studios are in Montreal? Start going through the yellow pages, page by page, and how many recording studios are there in Montreal, just to find out what part of the music industry basically was focused around a certain area. And I said, well, if there's a lot of music happening in this one area, then that's where I need to build. But all of this had to be done literally by it was a lot of time and paper and walking around and asking people and telephoning people and asking people what their thoughts were on me building rehearsal studios and how do I build rehearsal studios. I mean, I had no idea even about soundproofing. So it wasn't foreseen. I had to do a lot of research.
Did you ever get discouraged? Do you ever think that, maybe it wasn't the right move to?
You know what?
to
That's
move
the
on?
one thing that never entered my mind. Once I quit my job and once I had the thought of I'm going to open up rehearsal studios and they're going to be better than what I've been rehearsing in, I never ever once said this might not work. I couldn't have that mindset. I've never read The Secret, but the philosophy of visualize it and it will happen, that's what happened to me.
But when you're visualizing it, what a lot of people do is they write out a business plan. They do their research. They write a plan. Okay, it might not be to the T as it gets executed, but they write it out. So they kind of visualize it on paper as they
Yes.
write the plan.
Yes.
Did you take that route?
Absolutely. I mean, there was no other way to do it. I mean, I needed to get a loan to start the business, so I needed to have a business plan, in place. And that's how I basically visualized it, by going through all of the steps of what my business plan needed for me to be able to present that to a bank and say, hey, this is all the experience that I've had over the past, 15 years in the music industry. This is what I'm planning to do, and read it, tell me what you think. And it was, I did the research. It was very clear.
Never underestimate the plan, I think is the lesson here. And when we come back, we'll find out a little bit more about how Albert looks and tries to stay up with his competition as well.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD with our guest Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios.
'Cause this is not the end.
7:25, more work from Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios. You can hear it right now, Josh.
That wasn't me. He didn't fix my voice to sound like that, so don't worry.
Well, with autotune, you can do almost anything these days.
That's not autotune. That is Cynthia Barud. She's an amazing, amazing singer, and trust me, I'm like not a fan of autotune. We can get in that later.
She sounds lovely. So, Josh, we're talking about how Albert set up his studio, and it seems like a very complicated process, a very expensive process.
And I think when we were just before the break, we were talking about competition and knowing what else is out there and what you have to provide in your studio. How did you gain that knowledge, and what was your philosophy to make sure that you were differentiated from your competitor?
Well, first of all, I mean, I did have to work with a budget. Therefore, I had to be realistic about what I was building. So, there were rehearsal studios that are already in existence that had, small rooms to extremely huge rooms, facilities. And I figured, I said, if I have one big, huge room, that will only cater to the A-list clients. And it kind of scared me that I'd only have, one type of client booking, and I'd be competing against those other studios that deal with just the A-list clients. But they had other things that were backing them up too. They had rehearsal studios, they had music retail, instrument rental. They had a whole bunch of things to support if ever that didn't, go well. So I think I went with a mid to large size room that facilitated anywhere from the amateur to the semi-professional to the professional A-list clientele, and it proved to be a good move because a lot of my competitors ended up closing their rehearsal division. So, yeah.
Now, when you're equipping this studio, and as you said earlier, just a moment ago, you needed to be budget conscious. I mean, you weren't working with a blank check at the beginning. How did you manage? Did your plan at the beginning say, you know what, I got to get this kind of equipment? It's a little bit less expensive. Did that change?
Yeah, no, I never. That was the one thing that I said. I'm a professional musician, and I used to play live a lot. I mean, more studio so now. But when I played live, I said, well, I'm not going to equip my rehearsal studios with anything less than what I would accept myself playing on. I used to give advice to the pros that used to play with Celine and so forth about what to use live. So why would I? It would be kind of weird and hypocritical of myself, going into a studio and equipping my studios with like mediocre gear and saying, no, it's really good. Listen to it. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't fly. I mean, I needed the gear to sell and be a big part of the marketing of my studio. So there had to be a wow factor. The support of Steve's music was a huge factor. I mean, I had money to buy my own drums, and the first person that came up to me was Lenny at Steve's who manages the drum department. Said, "You need drums?" I said, "Yeah, I'm ready to buy some drums." He said, "Well, what if you don't need to buy drums?" I was like, "Well, wouldn't that be lovely?"
Exactly.
So I mean, I had the support. I was very fortunate, and not all the gear was supported through those means, but they knew that I was coming in. I was buying a whole bunch of gear and equipment, and they were behind me 110% on any way that they could help me. And the equipment was I couldn't cheap out on the equipment. It was important.
Did you have to learn? I mean, how do you keep up with the knowledge of the equipment and the
it's funny.
different instruments if you didn't play them all? Or
You know what? Engineering wasn't my forte. I was a bass player. I knew how to get my bass to sound great on stage, if I was playing live. But then people, it's like once I started setting up my studios, they were like, well, you realize you need to get EQs for your monitors, because you're going to be feeding back once you have more than one or two microphones that are live in the room. And I was like, really? Okay, frequencies? I got to control it? Yeah, you got to get compressors too to like make sure that your speakers aren't blowing. Compressors, ratio, level, threshold.
so how did you learn it? How did you learn?
You know what? I've been doing this for years. So all of my friends are in the music industry, and everybody was like knocking on the door to help me out, and I have great friends that would come by and go, this is how you're going to work your EQ. This is what you need your EQ for. This is what you need your compressors for. And everything happened in steps. Yeah.
I think it's great. And I think the big lesson here in that little story, that little anecdote, is that you can't know everything. So if you can't,
Impossible.
you got to surround yourself with the people and friends and colleagues that can help you exactly in the areas that you're missing.
Accept the help. Don't be
gotta
don't be
accept it.
proud, and don't think that you know everything. I mean, that's going to kill you.
More with Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios on today's Entrepreneur.
Keep on keeping it real. Keep on keeping it real. Keep on keeping it real. Keep on.
Some of the lovely sounds that Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios produces on a daily basis.
Still not me.
No, still not you.
No, that's the lovely Coral Egan. She's got a great voice. It was great working with her. Yeah.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD, Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with our guest Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios, and we're talking about the studio, rehearsal studio, productions, post-production studio, working with a lot of artists, a very interesting endeavor, a very expensive endeavor, dealing with a lot of new technology. So why don't we go there, Albert? Why don't you tell us about, I guess, keeping up to date with all the transforming technology? I know when we moved into here, into new studios here at CJAD, it would require just an overhaul. So I can't imagine how up to date you must be on a yearly basis.
You know what? I think the rehearsal studio division part is just maintaining the gear. Now with technology and things like that, I think in the recording part of the facilities, it's changed immensely, and that's something that I constantly to this day keep on updating, and that's not within a yearly thing. This is like we do on a monthly basis, whether it's a new software update or a new type of outboard piece of gear or summing unit and whatnot. I mean, there's so many things that change within a recording environment. It's ridiculous. I find it hard to actually keep up with everything, so sometimes I just like to go back to basics. And for the rehearsal divisions, for the most part, a lot of the gear is basically the same type of equipment that I've used for years. As long as it lasts and toughs 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, I feel no reason to change certain pieces.
There's never been really abuse of the equipment, or
Oh.
you monitor it. I mean, haven't
yeah.
had crazy artists come in and
Oh
start
yeah.
smashing, and
Oh yeah, I have. Yeah, sure, of course.
that's what insurance for.
Yeah, that's what insurance is for, and you'll have the band fight. I mean, it's 80 bands a week, 7 days a week. 17 years later, yeah, I've had some fights. I've had brawls. I've had chairs thrown in the studio. I mean, you pretty much see all of it, and it's all part of it. I've been extremely fortunate, knock on wood. This is Milliman, but whatever. That I've never had the studios really, 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 wrecked in any type of huge form. But I've had one thing stolen from inside the studios, and I've had one laptop stolen at my studios. In 17 years. I think that's a pretty good record of 80 bands a week coming through. So, yeah.
And I would imagine you're not alone there. You have some people that are working with you.
Yes, I have employees that work for me. Yes. I have I have 3 full-time guys, and I always have sub guys that basically replace those guys, because everybody that works for me are musicians. They go out on tour, they play live, and so they need people to replace them, and vice versa for the other people.
At what point did you realize you could no longer be a one-man show? That you really needed to expand your horizon, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, everything was related to budget once again, when I first started. And when you first open up a business, you don't always have the budget to have employees on hand, depending on what you're doing, right? My facilities did not, it didn't have any reason for me to actually employ anybody the first few months. Probably the first 6 months, I ran the show alone. And when we're saying 6 months, doesn't seem like a very long time, but I would be there at 9:45 in the morning, and I would leave at 2:30 in the morning. And this went on 7 days a week for 6 months straight. At the end of that 6-month haul, I realized that I was just going bonkers, and I couldn't do it alone. So I slowly would hire one guy a week, and then that stretched on to 2 days a week and 3 days a week. And I mean, it's just a gradual process.
And then you can work on other parts of your business. You can expand your service offering.
You know what? That was basically a must. There wasn't any other way to sort of look at it, and the studios did what they did, and then you sort of max out how many clients you can actually take in for the day, and then you say, well, listen, I have more time to do other things that I love, and producing and writing was one of them, and that's something that I took on very seriously.
Given that your business is so artistic, did you find it difficult to find people you could trust to produce quality art?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, if I understand the question right, I mean, people that are coming into the studio, yeah, some of them should be doing it for a living, and some of them shouldn't. But who am I to say that this person, isn't gonna make it or break it, right? It's like I always tell people, I say, you know what? Let somebody else give that person the bad news, whether they should be doing it or not. Just do what you do. And these people have a dream, and I'm not going to be the one to squash it. I'm gonna encourage them in doing what they love. I mean, when I opened up my studios, people thought I was crazy. The rehearsal studios, like, no, man, don't do that. What are you thinking? And I can't have that mindset going in, with my clients either. It's like I have to encourage them.
And one of the, of course, biggest challenges, you're opening up a brand new studio, brand new business. You got to get people to come into the door. So let's kind of talk a little bit about marketing. How did you get people to know you existed? How did the traffic start coming in?
I think, once again, there wasn't any internet back then. So advertising in local zines, whether it was the Hour, the Voir, the Mirror back then, the Gazette, La Presse, any little ad that I could do, I would basically place ads, and I would do a lot of passing out flyers and going to colleges and CJEPs, and it was a lot of like hitting the pavement once again, and talking to a lot of my peers that were in the music industry, and having those 6 years of working at Steve's Music Store helped me immensely. So I had a lot of support from people telling people where to go.
Now, part of your business isn't just a rehearsal studio; it's also producing. It's also mixing and sound work and all that. How did you get to the artist from there? Once you develop that unique ability, how do they know to come to you?
It's kind of weird. I was always very shy about advertising, about producing or writing or mixing. I didn't want people to get confused. And, like you said, about marketing is like extremely important. If, Studio Basebin was known for years as a rehearsal studio, and we've morphed into more than that. I do produce and I write, but I try not to advertise the studios as a recording studio, because I'm not really a recording facility like a commercial studio would be. I am hired as a producer and as a writer. I have a project room within my facility that I use to be able to work out of. I have top-notch gear that I use within my facility, but I take on certain projects, and I don't take on anybody that just wants to record just about anything, mainly because I can choose to do so.
Does your business get hit by recessions in the economy?
Yeah, 2009, I took a kick in the butt.
Didn't everyone?
Yeah, didn't everyone, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we're still feeling the ripples of that hit, but I think.
How do you adjust? What do you learn from that?
Pure tenacity of just it's saying I can't give up. I literally, at one point during that recession, I remember the irony kills me on this story is that I came into the studios, and strapped to my doorknob of my office door was an eviction notice, which probably a lot of people don't know about. But I think it's hilarious now because now I'm over it.
It's after the fact.
Yeah, it's after the fact. Was an eviction notice, and within the same hour, I was actually handed a gift basket from the building that actually was threatening to evict me. So I got a Christmas gift basket and an eviction notice within the same hour. And I thought that was just hilarious. Needless to say, I was stressed out. But when you sustain yourself somewhere for so many years, a lot of the paperwork and things like that, just to let people know not to get discouraged, is that if you show that you have that type of tenacity and you show sustainability in something, they know that you'll be able to pull yourself out of it. These eviction notices, a lot of times they're sent out, they're random to if you're late on rent and whatnot. But the people that know you personally, that are that have like allowed you to occupy that space, know that you're going to come around. If you've been around for 12, 15 years and you've been paying the rent, and all of a sudden they see a dip, and everybody's taking the hit during recession, they know that the things will turn around. So things did, and but it was just pure just adrenaline rush of I got to get things happening again. Yeah.
And it's a never give up kind of situation that if
no
you
choice.
believe in it and you have the right customer base and you know that you can make a go of it with your plan, then you will. And I think that's what a lot of entrepreneurs need to know. They have to, if the plan is correct and it's been well thought out and it can happen, then that's what you have to keep pushing.
Oh yeah.
And then there's the money. We'll get to the money in a second, and how to get into the banks and how to prepare something that'll be favorably welcomed by the bank. So we'll get to that in a second, Josh. Inspiring stories from outstanding business people, Dan Delmar and Josh Miller of Fuller Landau. Our guest this evening, Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios. And of course, Josh, setting up a studio probably, unless you're really, really wealthy, requires that you deal with some banks. So let's talk about that now, Josh. And how should an entrepreneur prepare him or herself to prepare something favorable that would allow a bank to lend the money?
And I think the first lesson, and Albert mentioned it earlier on the show, is plan. You cannot walk into a bank randomly. You really need to do your research, and have some type of business plan going in. I think it's huge. If you walk into a bank without a stitch of paper, without a real good path of where you want to go, that's going to be a real uphill battle. I mean, what you have to remember at the end of the day, the entrepreneur is going in to sell his or her idea, sell his or her business idea that it will actually make money at the end of the road, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, hopefully not beyond. But that's what they really have to go in, and they have to be prepared. You cannot just go in completely unprepared and wing it. Winging it just doesn't work.
Albert, what was your experience in dealing with banks?
Well, I think going in with the same mindset that Josh was talking about is going in prepared and realizing that when you're going to a bank and you're actually pitching an idea for a loan, you have to think of it as, I'm here to make you money. Lend me money, you'll make money. I mean, it's a business. I mean, at the end of the day, the banks aren't there to give, charity. They're not a charity donation, like a place. This is a place of business. And we were talking about how getting loans today are a lot harder than back in the day when I actually got my loan. Not to say that I had to do any less work than you would today, but the only difference is like Josh was mentioning, is that the people that you're pitching the idea to are actually not in front of you today. Whereas back in the day, right?
It's absolutely very different today, because when you started 17 years ago, the lending powers of each individual branch, a lot of it relied with the discretion of the branch manager. Today, it's so much more centralized, these decisions. And I think one of the biggest wake-up calls, or one of the biggest realities that entrepreneurs are faced with, is when they're sitting in front of the banker or the customer relationship manager, or whatever fancy name they choose to call themselves today, they're selling their business idea to them. That person, in turn, has to take it to their credit or risk department or some back office. I was about to say schnook. Some back office professional that has to take that information, digest it, dissect it, and come
Sell it
back
themselves.
and sell it themselves.
Yeah.
You and the customer relationship managers are actually in one of the worst positions that bankers have ever been in years. Why? Because the owners of the banks, they're telling them to go sell because they want to lend money, but at the same time, I think they put on the brakes because they say, well, they have to prove their idea to the nth degree. Mm-hmm. Now, at the end of the day, it's kept the Canadian economy quite strong because the banking system is strong. But there has to be some give and push for entrepreneurs, which comes back to you better be prepared. You better go in with your guns fully loaded.
And how honest are you supposed to be in these situations? Do you want to tell the bank literally everything, paint the most realistic picture you can, or do you let's just say put on rose-colored glasses?
I think, Dan, the quick answer is you want to be honest. Now, there's no question that everything is case by case, but transparency at the end of the day will be your friend, because information is too easy to get, and the people, the Oz behind the big curtain that's going to be asking questions is going to be asking a million questions, and one of those questions is bound to trip you up. If you don't go in starting with the truth from day one, and you trip over one of your less truths, your credibility is shot. And the moment your credibility is in the gutter, it's very difficult to bounce back.
Is it best that you go into these meetings alone, or maybe you have a lawyer with you, or someone to support you, a business advisor?
Well, I think and Albert said it earlier. We commented that if you don't know one aspect of your business, or you're missing some key component, clearly you have to have the right partner with you to help you make sure you get to that next stage. No different in bank meetings. If you know your business, but you can add credibility to that meeting, to that idea, with somebody next to you, one or two people, whether they complement you, whether it's on the finance side, the sales side, the operations side, doesn't matter. If you can be better as a team than one, do it.
We're talking about talking to banks on today's Entrepreneur with our guest Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios. 7:55 on today's Entrepreneur. Our guest is Albert Chambers of Basebin Studios, and Josh, we're talking about approaching the bank, as is the case in many businesses. Certainly, when you're putting together a studio, gotta borrow some money at some point. How quickly should the entrepreneur expect a bank to close a deal if you're trying to borrow money?
Much longer than they think it will. Now, again, this is not 17 years ago where the branch manager sitting in front of you that you're telling your story to can effectively make the decision, as I'm sure, Albert, when you first went 17 years ago, how long did it take you to close that deal?
Within a month or 2 months, I got an answer. And like you said, I'll echo that, is that I was literally pitching the idea to the person that was going to either say yay or nay to my business plan. So I had all my my I's dotted and my T's crossed, and a lot of support in the credits that I had on records for the service that I had rendered them when I worked at Steve's Music Store. So I had a lot of credibility behind me already.
And I think today, or the difference with today, and of course it does depend on how much you're asking for. If you're going to ask for approximately $50,000, 75, certainly under 100, they'll base it a lot more on the individual and the individual's assets and that ability. Once you start going beyond that, you're getting to the couple of hundred and 500 and million plus. It is going to take a lot longer because you're not pitching to the person making the decision. Mm-hmm. You're pitching to the person that's going to pitch to the person that will pitch to the person making the decision. It's gotten that much layered, and it's always going to come back with so much paperwork and so much backup documents, and as much as we're trying to save trees these days, there's really a ton of trees that get killed with all the information that banks provide. Now, it's better for them. They're trying to, at the end of the day, they're really trying to minimize their risk. So we understand that. And the indirect benefit to the entrepreneur is that sometimes they actually make you think as well. Sometimes they'll ask you a question that you may not have completely thought about. So it's not, the process is not a bad process. It's just sometimes a frustrating one.
Do banks typically ask for you to commit personal funds to this or provide something for collateral?
You hear this famous 4 words, skin in the game. Do you have skin in the game? Have you put up your own money because you believe in the product or process or service? That goes a long way to your credibility. Even, you have a plan, you have everything else on paper, you have a financial projection that seems to make a lot of sense. But when you're going there, if you physically put in your own funds, that you believe in it. Other than the fact that the banks ask for a lot of ratios to be met, you have to have a certain number of assets to your liabilities. You have to, try and in your first year, if you have a loss, you got to try and cover it or make sure that you have your own funds in there. If you have your own money on the line, you have risked something. That speaks volumes to the bank, and it's really private money that's put in there. The bank just wants to know that, hey, they're not in it alone.
And real quick, Josh, the importance of a business plan. I know you stress this frequently.
Just got to have it. You got to have something. You cannot walk in. Don't walk in with one sheet of paper, half a sheet of paper. Walk in with a few. Make sure it's got the people. The management team is huge. The financials are huge. The product and marketing is big.
And now, of course, for the conclusion to the show with Albert Chambers, Albert.
What one piece of advice would you offer today's entrepreneur?
If you are going to start up a business, know your business inside and out. Know who your competitors are and what you need to do to one-up all of them.
I think that's great. And just as there's so many lessons and takeaways I get, Dan, but one of them was a don't give up. One of them was a tenacity. One of them is a perseverance that we've seen so many times on the show. Yes, you can follow your dream. It's easy to follow. It's hard to keep following when it doesn't happen right away.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep following when somebody's putting an eviction notice on your door. It's hard to keep following when somebody is slamming that potential opportunity or is not giving you that contract. Keep going. You believe in it, properly plan, and it will happen.
Yeah, it sounds cliche, but it is true. The cliche wins. Yeah.
And keep your energy up and your enthusiasm up, which is clearly the case with you, Albert. So thanks very much. Albert Chambers from Basebin Studios. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you, guys.
And Josh back next Monday night at 7 p.m. for another edition of Today's Entrepreneur on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.